I would like to call the special meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 6:03 p.m. Please join me in the first salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are now operating under suspended rules. Madam Clerk, would you please read the notice of the special meeting, please?
Certainly. Date March 28th, 2024. To members of the Municipal Council from James Delisio, Council President. Councilors, by authority of Article 2, Section 2-7C of the Attleboro Home Rule Charter, I hereby call an executive session of the Municipal Council as follows. Date is Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024, 6 p.m., 77 Park Street, City Council Chambers, Attleboro. Executive purpose is executive session pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, to discuss strategies with respect to litigation entitled Kerr v. City of Attleboro, Bristol Superior Court, Civil Action Number 2373CV00350. In Kerr v. City of Attleboro, United States District Court, Civil Action Number 123CV13045, NMG. Sincerely, James Delisio, President.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order.
It's 2183 is the purpose, is the litigation.
2183.
I may have misheard it, but I thought I heard.
Okay, we'll take that as a friendly amendment, 2183. We'll do a roll call vote.
Sure.
This will begin with Councilor Cobus.
Councilor Cobus.
Yes.
Councilor Foer.
Yes.
Councilor Lavoy.
Yes.
Councilor Reynolds.
Yes.
Vice President Dolan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Holmes.
Yes.
Councilor Angelo.
Yes.
Councilor Sawyer.
Yes.
Councilor Waterman.
Yes.
Councilor Tavares.
Yes.
President Delisio.
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes. We are now in executive session. I'll invite our city attorneys, our city clerk, as well as our administrative assistant. Bring it over. I would like to call this meeting of the Municipal Council back to order at 7:25. Just a reminder, we are operating under suspended rules, and as such, tonight we will not be entering into committee of the whole due to the agenda with 5 public hearings, as well as the late start to this meeting. That being said, Madam Clerk, would you please read the notice for the first public hearing, which I believe is a continued joint public hearing?
Continued joint public hearing. The Council and Planning Board will hold a hearing for the following: a rezoning petition from John F. D. Jacoby III regarding proposed amendment to ordinance section 17-6.9, table of permitted signs and dimensional regulations of the revised ordinances of the city of Attleboro.
Thank you. Good evening. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? First, can we call
bring
the
the planning board up, don't
in? I was already talking to you. I thought we were there.
Which button do I press to get our PowerPoint up?
No, I can hardly operate my cell phone. Do we have anyone who works for Google who might understand? Austin, you able?
There we are, Jack, you did it.
This quick thing.
Thank you. Perfect. Mr. President, members of the council, Madam Chair, members of the planning board, Jack Jacoby, 144 Bank Street, representing technically 10 registered voters of the city. In reality, it is these 2 gentlemen who own billboard companies that are sitting behind me, so I'll explain all that to you in a moment. At the outset, I want to thank you for accommodating my schedule and continuing this hearing from a couple of weeks ago. I have not yet figured out how to be in 2 places at once. If I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Please do.
So, we passed our sign ordinance a number of years ago. We really haven't tinkered with it much since. My knowledge, this may be the first time that somebody has asked to change it. So the first slide that we have is the language, and I'm going to go over it fairly quickly, but then get to the other ones after it. So we're proposing to amend 2 aspects of the sign ordinance. Under the first one is under Electronic Message Center. The second bullet provides that messages, images may refresh no sooner than every 20 seconds. We are proposing to change that to every 10 seconds. We'll give you more information as to why in a moment. The second one is to amend the table of use regulations that's included there, because off-premises signs are not allowed anywhere in the city at all, the way things are now set forth. And so we are proposing to change the letter N in the industrial section to S, which would mean that it would be a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the intent of the first change is to bring the city's zoning ordinance into compliance with the state's requirements relating to how often the images on a sign may or must change. All announcements and public safety alerts, all state permitted electronic message center billboards are required to provide public service announcements, public safety alerts as part of the permit. The state requirement is that mandated messages appear in a rotation of 6 messages during a 1-minute period or every 10 seconds. And so I'm not sure exactly why we adopted 20 seconds when we did this, but I think the thought was that there would potentially be a distraction to motorists. What has happened now is that the state has settled, and there's a state regulation I'll point you to later, that 10 seconds is the safe and appropriate refresh for it. And the second one is that we would like to construct 2 billboards in Attleboro in each in an industrial district. There are 2 potential sites along Route 95, which are the only 2 where such a billboard might be permitted. One of these is at 20 Rutledge Drive, which is CityWorks Fence in South Attleboro, and the other is at Sturgis Windows and Doors, 79 Walton Street, which is in the Northwest Industrial Park. So, moving on to the next page. I know this is a little hard to read, but if you look at off-premises sign is there, you'll see the letter N everywhere. That means that nowhere in the city can you advertise something that isn't occurring at the site. And our proposal is to take the industrial zone only and change that N to an S. That would allow the zoning board, in their discretion, to decide whether it's appropriate or not to have a billboard in the industrial zone. The next slide shows you the electronic message center, which is allowed by special permit, but the second bullet under here is the one that says that it can only change every 20 seconds. And that is the other thing we are proposing to change, is to change that to 10 seconds. The 2 locations where we could apply to the zoning board if the council changes the sign ordinance would be, as I said, at 20 Rutledge Drive and 79 Walton Street. And there's a pointer down here, right on Route 95, is where CityWorks Fence is. And way up here at 79 Walton at the industrial park, the far back end of it is where that would be. And I'm told by my clients that those are the only 2 possible places that anyone could construct a billboard in Attleboro. And of course, they're both in the industrial zone. So you would not be opening this up to other than in an industrial zone. And frankly, the only place that anybody wants to put these is along a major highway. So, moving along. This is the CityWorks site right here, and you can see Route 95. You can see that it would be built right in this area here, and it is an industrial area. There are no residents nearby. One of the things that would be important about this is that the signs would only be visible from Route 95. No resident would be able to see, nor any other business, because they would be facing that way. This is the Sturgis site, which again is along Route 95. So you put a sign wherever in the parking lot, or maybe on top of the building, I'm not sure. But again, that would be at the far back end of the industrial park, and it would be an area where no resident could see the sign. One of the things that Tim Lewis used to ask, when he was a member of the planning board for many years, is what's in this for the city of Attleboro? And I'm going to address that. So we're going to give you some revenue generation, community health, safety, and awareness, and emphasize that there would be no public resources required. So it's not like this is going to require police or fire. It is way up in the air. Also, I gave you a copy of the Code of Mass Regulations, and that's important because the city gets 15 hours per month of total advertisement sign in that rotation of 6 signs in a minute. And that is by state regulation, and so I'm going to show you what that could be. And they have to certify to the Outdoor Advertising Board every month that they've given the city the 6 hours in 10-second bites. The other thing that I copied here from the Code of Mass Regulations was the 10-second requirement that the state has adopted and has determined that that is what is safe now. So, the big thing that we're offering to the city is to enter into a community host agreement. I borrowed that term from the marijuana facilities, but it seemed like a good title. And in the event that this council was to change the ordinance and the zoning board gave a special permit, then each face that was permitted would pay $25,000 annually for a term of 20 years. So that means that you have a face at the City Works site that faces north and south, and so that's $50,000 from that particular sign. And then at the Sturgis site, you have a south and a north, so there's 50,000. So that's 100, assuming both were permitted by the zoning board, that would mean 100,000. That would mean $2 million paid over the 20-year life of the community host agreement to the city, which would go into the general fund for whatever the city decided it wanted to use it for. That would be up to the mayor and the council as to the appropriate ways to spend that. As I said, the guaranteed public service time is 6 hours, and that's 8,640 messages per month, $21.60 per face. No public resources that would be used. There's no police, no fire, no ambulance. Nobody goes to school. There's no water. There's no sewer. And so there's no taxpayer expense at all. One of the important things that I learned is that the state takes over the sign when there's an Amber Alert. And so that's what this is intended to show you, is that interrupts all of the commercial advertising. The Amber Alert goes up there until it's resolved. So every billboard in the state would be carrying that, including ours if they were permitted. The city could decide what it wanted for its time. So for instance, if the police wanted to have a billboard that showed that they were hiring, if the zoo wanted to advertise something, if you just simply wanted to encourage the Thanksgiving Day game, you could. And so it would be entirely up to the city to create the content, and I know that we have a content person who does our social media stuff, so I think it's a she. She could, as one of her tasks, create these things that would go into the rotation. So that is our presentation. We don't see any potential harm to any resident or any neighbor. I know that at one time billboards were considered to be sort of site pollution, but we are sensitive to the fact that these would be only visible from the highway. And so we are asking for your consideration in changing the ordinance so that we can apply to the zoning board to see if they would approve these. That is our presentation.
Thank you, Jack. Do we have any questions for Mr. Jacoby? Councilor Sawyer, and then Councilor Clay.
Hi, thanks for coming and doing this presentation. I just had a question. Do both of these things that you mentioned, 1 and 2, the electronic message time and the billboards going up, do they have to be adopted together? Both of those?
No, they would be separate applications. So if the zoning board said that the one could go in at Sturgis Glass but not the one at City Works, well, it would cut the revenue from the community host agreement in half, but they are independent. They would be 2 separate applications to the zoning board for those 2, and you don't have to get 2 or 0. It could be 1. So I think that answered your question.
And the time limit thing too is what I also mentioned.
Excuse me?
And the time limit thing as well from 20 seconds to 10 seconds? Does
Yeah,
that
because
have-
that's what the state requires.
I see.
The problem is that if you have a 20-second refresh, then you can't get the number of messages that they require by their regulation. And so that recently came up before the zoning board in another matter for another sign. And my understanding is that they granted a variance to allow that in that particular case. But this is the state standard. And, you know, and I know, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but I know Councilor Kobus was the chair of the land use committee at that time. And so, you know, we did the best we could at that time in adopting our sign ordinance, but experience has shown that 10 seconds is safe. You certainly wouldn't want 5 seconds. The idea is not to distract drivers. And so I was on Route 495 on Saturday, and I probably spent more time than I should have counting to 10 while I was looking at the sign. But I made sure that there was nobody around me, but, you know, it was not distracting.
Council Fowler?
Thank you, President Delacio. I was confused. You were talking about 6 hours, and in here it talks about the permit holder should designate a minimum of 15 hours per month for the cities.
Perhaps I misspoke. It is 15.
The state requires 15 hours to be designated for their time, and we're offering additional 6 hours per phase for the city.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
In 10-second bites.
So actually, according to the Mass Department of Transportation, Section A says each static display must last at least 10 seconds, not no more than 10 seconds. So the 20 seconds does actually still hold true to the state ordinance. We would not need to reduce that time any at all. And I don't know that it would necessarily be advantageous to the city to reduce the amount of time that ads set there. It would just be advantageous to the advertisers.
Council LaVoy, and then Council Tavares and Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I noticed that you said there would be no city resource use, but I'd be naive to think that somebody couldn't climb this and then need a fire truck to come out. Being that they're on private property, is that something in which the property owner would be willing to rebate the city and then pursue that person in small claims court? I'm just, who foots the bill on that circumstance? I'm sure there's probably points we could reference where it's happened.
Each of them is a lease arrangement with the property owner, and so the lessee would be responsible for that. But I can assure you that they will take every precaution to make sure nobody climbs those things. I can't tell you that I know what it is that you do, but there has to be a way to stop people from climbing those things.
Thank you.
Council Tavares.
So just one question. So just out of curiosity, just wondering, what's the rationale behind the request for the Second Amendment to change the table from underneath the off-premises sign row from N to S as in special permit as opposed to Y, which I assume is by right? Just curious on the rationale and the request.
It certainly my clients would appreciate a why. However, we thought that it was probably asking you for too much, that such a change from an N should go to the zoning board, and they should have the opportunity to look at the construction of the tower, the size of the sign, and make sure that all of the safety requirements are there. And so it was my judgment that asking for a Y was too much, and that it was more likely that the city would say, well, okay, we'll let you in the game, but you got to prove your case.
Mr. Davis?
Thank you. Attorney Jacoby, it's my understanding that if you get what you've petitioned for here, this would be the only form of off-site advertising that's allowed in the city, is that correct?
Yeah, because there's an N in every other one of those
Right.
categories.
So then how do you perceive this form of off-site advertising as any less detrimental than any other form?
because it can only be seen by motorists on Route 95. In other words, the problem with off-site advertising was that, you know, everybody would have some sort of a billboard, you know, all sorts of places in the city. And I understand why, you know, when this was framed, nobody said, well, we don't want that. What we're talking about here is a very, very limited arrangement where there's only 2 possible places that you could have this, and those would be only visible from Route 95. So it would, in my mind, it's not sign pollution, if that's what you're driving at.
Well, my fear is it's easy for an applicant to say that these are the only 2 locations where this could probably occur. But as we all know, historically, there's always a slippery slope. Once you open that door, there's nothing that says 10 years from now that there aren't going to be a half a dozen other locations that somehow become financially viable to make them also suitable for this kind of advertisement. And I think, you know, you alluded to the sort of sign pollution concept. It's easy to advocate for something when you have a client who feels that it's financially advantageous to them. But you were around when this ordinance was created just a few years ago, correct? And at that time, to the best of my knowledge, you felt what was proposed then was applicable?
I actually made a PowerPoint presentation that my son made for me of 40-odd signs around the city and actually appeared against this ordinance at that time. But in answer to your question, if, as Councilor Tavares said, we put a Y there, now the door is open. But by putting an S there, that means that the zoning board is going to look at it. So in the event that somebody wanted to put a sign that faced neighbors, then they would have the ability to say no, because any time there is a severe undesirable effect on the neighborhood or the environment, they have the right to turn it down. And so that's why I'm saying to you, even though your prediction might be better than mine, it leaves the zoning board in control.
Thank you.
Thank you. You stated that the billboards wouldn't be near any residences or impact them, but on the map that you provided for the location at Rutledge Drive, there are multiple residences directly next to this. How would the light from that not impact those residences?
Because the sign would face the highway.
Maybe directly, but the foot candles aren't going to only shoot directly in one direction, so you would be from the sign.
No, it doesn't. The way that they do these with LEDs now, there's no light pollution. And that also would be one of the factors that the zoning board takes into account. Every application we file for any project has to include a lighting plan with the foot candles and what's visible. And their standard is that no light can be visible off of the subject property. That is every application, and I'm there every month, so I know. Every application before the zoning board requires the lighting plan with the foot candle not off of the site.
Chibney?
Yes, Emma just asked my question, but the residents here would still be able to see the actual structure?
Well,
Whether
yeah,
they're seeing the advertisement or not, they're still seeing the structure?
They yes, certainly.
Yep, this is my own ignorance. Do these signs make like a whirring sound or something like that? Is there any noise associated with the digital signs?
My understanding is there is no noise.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Yeah, Attorney Jacoby, I'm interested in your financial enticement that you've offered the city in order to make this happen. And historically, I'm always skeptical when people feel it's worth offering money to change an ordinance. How did you come up with the calculations of what was a worthwhile investment for your clients to offer the city?
Other communities have required similar host agreements with the exact same number.
Okay, so this would be comparable to what other communities in similar situations have done?
For instance, North Attleboro.
Additional questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Jacoby.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Corbus, are you able to remove the PowerPoint so we can see the Zoom? Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? One moment. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against?
Good evening, Council President, members of the Municipal Council, Planning Board Chairman, members of the Municipal Council. For the record, my name is Gary Arazian. I'm the City's Director of Planning and Development. Two aspects to the proposed amendment. One has to do with the change in timing, and the other has to do with the table of use regulations. So I'm going to take these up one at a time. So first, I think there's a mechanical flaw with changing the time delay from 20 seconds to 10 seconds, because right now, our zoning ordinance calls for a 20-second delay. The proposed billboard that the applicant is proposing, or will ultimately propose if the ordinance were to pass, says that the electronic display would change to 10 seconds because federal law or the law of the Commonwealth allows for that. But if you were to change that, there are also local signs that aren't the billboards, where we did a great deal of research and determined that a delay of 20 seconds is the best timing that we should have. If we were to change that for the billboard, then that changes all the timings or the delays for all the other electronic message boards in the city that the Zoning Board of Appeals regulates. And I don't think we're ready for that. As in regards to the table of use regulations, this ordinance is fairly young in the timeline of zoning ordinances. It's only been adopted, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I know the planning board, the senior land use planner, did a yeoman's job in doing a great deal of research, and I think we have an exceptionally well-written zoning ordinance when it comes to signs. I recall time after time when developers have called, and all we could tell them is, yeah, you have to have a setback of either 15 feet, 30 feet, or 75 feet. And the jaws were dropped to say, you got to be kidding me, there's got to be something else. And we didn't have anything. And shame on us for all these years not having such an ordinance. So we have written, and it's withstood the test of time, as Attorney Jacoby said, I think it's the first time we've ever even approached amending it or modifying it, which is a testament to its well-written substance, that philosophically, I have an issue as the city's planner not to allow off-site advertising, particularly on 95. It says, well, it's only for motorists. Yeah, well, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of motorists. Their eyes are going to get captured by it. And if you've traveled, which I know we all have, from the Attleboro-Norton line to the Attleboro-Pawtucket line, that stretch of 95 is gorgeous. Unless, of course, you come to a few billboards down along the Pawtucket line, which is no big deal because those are grandfathered. We didn't regulate it at the time. Those have been there a long time ago. And more recently, an applicant has appeared before the Board of Appeals to alter a pre-existing non-conforming sign. They met the standards and the ZBA approved it. Well, we've got a gorgeous stretch of 95. It's plush with trees and green. Let's keep it that way. You know, I think Mr. Davis brought up the point, well, you start off with 2, and you create a wedge. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen 2 months from now or 10 years from now. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you open the door, you put your foot in the door, and you allow it now, albeit to the Board of Appeals. Well, you look at the standards for the granting of a special permit. We talked about issues with the fire department, the police department, neighborhood issues, water, sewer. Well, a lot of those standards don't apply. Which kind of says this is going to go through, not because of poor review by the Board of Appeals, but whether or not the Board of Appeals has the sufficient tools to evaluate such an application. So, whatever your thought process is, I just think that we ought to keep 95 the way it is. We've got some right now, pre-existing non-conforming uses. Let's not corrupt it. It's a beautiful part of Attleboro, part of our highway network. It's green, it's flush. I'm not about to comment on anything, on any other aspects, because those aspects of considerations from the police chief, fire chief, that's beyond land use. Financial considerations beyond my field of expertise with respect to land use. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on those. But in its purest form and its essence, I just don't think it's a good idea for Attleboro, at least not right now. The ordinance is fairly new. Let's just keep it the way it is.
Do you have questions for Mr. Arazian? Mr. Davis?
Mr. Asian, you alluded to a point that it concerned me. What criteria would the zoning board actually be allowed to use to accept or reject an application for a billboard of this?
Sure, right now, off the top of my head, a couple come up. I don't know if it's A or B. No, it's not A. It's either B or C. Whether or not the proposed use will have an adverse effect on the environment, public, or the public, the environment, and there's a third one, municipal facilities. Well, the question is the implication on the environment or the public. If enough of people come out in opposition, it's not that it's a popularity contest. People have to have a cogent reason if they're against something. You can't just say whimsically because I don't like it. On the other hand, people come and support it. So, we'd have to go by at least that one criteria. There are other criteria, depending on, I think it's subsection 5, which talks about special regulations. Those special regulations could be that the construction of the pylon would require an earth removal permit. It might be in a floodplain. So there are other technical aspects of the zoning board, of the zoning ordinance, that might be triggered.
Thank you.
Councilor Corbett?
Thank you for coming, Gary. Aside from these potential signs, are there any other alternatives that Attleboro businesses have to sort of direct them to businesses in Attleboro that like other communities have, besides like the blue highway signs? Or so like North Attleboro has potential billboards in other. There's billboards in other communities to sort of drive business to those communities, but
for example,
so you know how on the highway there's the blue signs.
That's federal. That's federal.
Those federal signs.
Yeah.
Are there other alternatives to drive people to businesses in Attleboro, or are Attleboro businesses at a disadvantage
So
to
good question.
potential other communities?
So there are times when I'm not able to answer a question on the floor. And respectfully, if I ask, because I can't, doesn't mean that I can't right now because I don't know. What I respectfully ask, if I may get invited to a committee meeting so I could look at the ordinance and come back and give you an answer. But with respect to that comment about the blue signs and all that, sure, but those are federally regulated. That's not by a local ordinance, zoning ordinance.
Okay.
But if you like, I'd be happy to come back and I think it's Councilor Sawyer's committee. I'd be happy to come back and scour the zoning ordinance and provide you with an answer at that time, Councilor Cobus.
Councilor Lavoy?
Perfect. Thank you for speaking tonight, Gary. A quick question. I know you mentioned signs in Pawtucket, and then others mentioned North Attleboro. Aside from opening the floodgate, to the locations in question, how close are those to the other signs you mentioned? Are these gonna be drastically off to where they're disrupting the beautiful section of 95?
Can I come back and answer that? I'll take a look at the application, and I'll be glad to come back and give you my opinion at that time. But what I mentioned wasn't signs in Pawtucket. What I mentioned were signs in Attleboro along the Pawtucket-Attleboro line. But they are definitely in Attleboro. Yeah, I don't want to suggest that those are signs in Pawtucket.
Could we, because I'm not sure, I don't want to just say for sure that Council Sawyer's going to invite guests. I'm sure she's accommodating. But are you able to get those answers through Virginia and she can disseminate?
Absolutely, sure, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to invite myself to a committee. I'm not too pushy, am I?
So question, outside of the aesthetic concerns that you raised over these off-premises signs, are there concerns that you have that you think right now the ZBA would not be able to address with the current standard for a special permit were this to change?
I think those are mutually exclusive. So what I don't want to do is compromise the spirit of a public hearing and say to you, to the planning board and the council, that the zoning board's hands are cuffed. I think the zoning board can speak for itself. So, and I don't want to, again, I think the spirit of a public hearing is at the core of what we all do. And I don't want to speculate on that. On the first part of your question, the aesthetics, that's why we did this, is to cut down on the amount of clutter, disjointed signs all over the place. Now, one might say, Gary, have you been down Route 1 or this? Well, sure. Again, we just adopted this roughly 5 years ago. It's going to take time to get some traction for it to start to, it's like an ocean liner. It takes a little time. It doesn't spin on a dime. You kind of have to nudge it. But eventually, we're going to get in that direction. And I think, respectfully, Counselor, that this proposal tonight is contrary to that. It is about aesthetics. It's about what we want for our community, how we want it to look. And I'm not saying it has to be cookie cutter, but there should be some order in terms of, not to have garish signs all over a gasoline station because it happens to be some unknown holiday or something, or ribbons and balloons. And yeah, do you have like a grand opening? Sure. But what if it turns out to be like that all the time? Well, that's why you have a sign ordinance, is to bring some reputation to the community, some type of respect and things that the community feels better about itself. So where you limit the number of signs, the size of the signs, where you could illuminate those, the number of wall signs, freestanding signs, the clutter of signs. So it does. I'm not going to say it's purely about aesthetics, but that's the core, at least the way we wrote it. And again, I think we've made a heck of a dent so far, in my humble opinion. But I think those 2 points, respectfully, I think they're mutually exclusive of each other.
Additional questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have anyone else to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against?
Good evening, councilors. My name is Richard Conti. I live at 100 Berwick Road in Attleboro. I'm here to speak neither for nor against because I've learned that my words in this chamber don't usually go very far.
Welcome back.
What I wanted you to know, though, is that I was the person who introduced the sign ordinance to the city of Attleboro, and it was 9 years ago. And it was a contentious piece of legislation. And it was 8 years ago that we were debating it. And then it took a rest for a few years. And finally, after going to sleep, it resurfaced. And under the impressive guidance of our city planner, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and he almost convinced me to come up and speak in opposition. But he eloquently spoke about and I want to give you the backstory. Not everybody's in favor of billboards in Attleboro, and I was the lightning rod for that, and I got the calls. And we intentionally set the timing for 20 seconds so that billboards would not be so profitable as to invite more billboards into the city. That was the intent. However, that regulation has been ignored since the billboards have been built. Last Saturday, I was traveling southbound in the pouring rain when there was a traffic accident on 95 South, right at the billboard, and I was stuck there for 15 minutes and watched the 2 billboards change their signs every 10 seconds for 15 minutes. This has been going on for years. So who enforces that? It's the building inspector. Well, the building inspector has other things to do, and billboards changing their message 10 seconds instead of 20 seconds is not a public safety issue. So I'm not saying that the building inspector is not doing his job, but I am saying that the billboard companies are ignoring your ordinance, and they have been since it was passed. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that The reason why there's a financial agreement, and thank you, Councilor Davis, for bringing this up, is because it's to their advantage. I want the council to delay this whole measure until the assessor in the city of Attleboro has an opportunity to get the billboards that are currently existing appraised and make sure they're being taxed at full and fair cash value. That's going to require two approaches to value. They're going to have to do an income approach to find out how much money those billboards are generating and get to a net operating income divided by a cap rate and come up with a value. And the other way is to do a sales comparison approach. What are those billboards selling for? For the new billboards, it's a different approach. It's a cost approach of what does it cost to build that billboard. The billboards are not just what you see. There's an enormous footing in the ground of concrete that is massive. For cell towers, that footing can be cement down to 30 feet below grade just to hold up a cell tower. So think about a billboard, what that improvement is, and that's included in the appraisal. So before you think of accepting an agreement that's offering you what looks like they're offering you a check, first make sure you understand what those billboards are worth before you sign an agreement. And that concludes my comments, but I'll answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Conti. Now, you presently serve as the assessor in the city of Taunton, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I'm the chief assessor.
Could you tell us how this is handled in Taunton?
Taunton does not have any illuminated billboards. None, zero. Taunton only has 2 billboards. They're both wood, and they're illuminated with incandescent lights.
Do their ordinances allow for such billboards?
There is no ordinance in the city of Taunton that regulates billboards.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Mr. Conti, good to see you as always.
Good to see you too. You're going to see me again later.
We look forward to it. Do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Good evening, Mr. Kerr.
Good evening. Before I begin, I just wanted to point out a procedural thing. Robert's Rules of Order, or calling a point of order, can only be done when something is disrupting the meeting or being disorderly. And under federal law, under Massachusetts state
Excuse
law,
me, Mr. Kerr?
Massachusetts constitutional law,
Pardon me,
speech cannot be considered disorderly. So before you interrupt me and commit a constitutional violation, please do not.
Pardon me, Mr. Kerr.
And I'm going to
Public hearings are
It does
important
not- it does- you
opportunities for
cannot-
members
but
of the
you just
public.
recognize my ability to speak. You cannot then
Related
interrupt
to
my
this,
speech
I-
or regulate my speech once you've recognized my ability to speak. You can't do that. That's a violation of constitutional law, Massachusetts state law, and Massachusetts constitutional law, the oldest constitution known to man, established in 1782.
Excuse
So
me,
before
Mr.
you
Kerr?
interrupt me again and commit a constitutional violation, just shut up. You guys seem to have a massive misunderstanding of the law.
Virginia, please
And-
mute Mr.
and-
Kerr. Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? I'm sorry, neither for nor against.
You guys are just trying to cause a procedural shift to prevent. You cannot interrupt me. I got it. This is constitutionally protected. You cannot.
Councilor Sawyer, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
Chair Benet, do you see any reason to keep this chair open?
I do.
I declare this public hearing closed. Planning Board, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we enter into the next public hearing, we'll give the Planning Board time to vacate the chambers. Thank you for your work as always, Planning Board. Madam Clerk, prior to us going into our second public hearing, I'd like to remind the public that public hearings are an important opportunity for members of the public to share their opinions, thoughts, concerns, and to show their support or opposition for a particular matter. And as such, we ask all speakers to keep their comments during the public hearing portion of the meeting to relative to the matter of each public hearing. That being said, Madam Clerk, please read the second message for the second public hearing, please.
Certainly. Public hearing relative to the administration's program year 2024 through 2028 5-year consolidated plan. CDBG program year 2024 annual action plan. Authorization to submit said program year 2024 through 2028 5-year consolidation plan and CDBG program year 2024 annual action plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development on or before May 15th, 2024.
Thank you. Do we have anyone speak in favor? Doc, good evening.
Good evening, President Delicio, members of the Municipal Council, Dorothy Brissett, Community Development Director for the city. So I'm before Council this evening to present the city's 5-year Community Development Block Grant 5-year plan, as well as the program year 2024 annual action plan. I respectfully request that Councilman Kovas, could you please open up my presentation? You're doing a better job than I would have, so. Thank you, perfect. Thank you so much. So the city has been a direct recipient of these federal funds since the late 80s. As a result of such, the city has benefited at over $17 million in federal money to address the needs of our community, specifically those who are 80% of area median income or less. So just to give you an idea of what that number means, right now 100% of area median, so that's the average income for a 4-family household here in Attleboro, is just over $102,000. These funds are specifically allocated to the use of benefiting those who are at right around $89,000 or less for a family of 4. So just to give you a brief description on that. In addition to, the city has generated over $1.3 million in federal program funds. That's a repayment of some loans that we have given either through the result of our housing rehabilitation program or through the result of the use of economic development. So this evening, I'm going to be speaking on the 5-year consolidated plan. As a direct recipient of these funds, we are subject to do a 5-year evaluation of the city's needs of these federal funds. So for the past 16 months or so, I've been assessing the data that is available for the city. There's the 2020 census data, the Comprehensive Affordable Housing Strategic Plan, which is CHAZ data sets. These are data sets that are provided directly through HUD, which is a federal government agency. The Analysis of Impediment for Further Fair Housing. This is a plan that was completed by the 14 community consortium that the city is a part of back in 2018. And also, as an active member of the Housing Needs Committee, I've been able to collect some data relative to that specific committee. I held a public hearing on January 31st, and then I've also met various social service agencies, city departments, nonprofits, major stakeholders within the city. This is all in an effort to collect data to complete this 5-year plan and discuss and to develop what will be the use of our funds over the next 5 years. So what is it that CDBG funds can actually be used for? So we can support and develop the affordable housing units through either housing rehabilitation or, in some cases, the acquisition to reconstruct an existing building for affordable units. We can also provide funding for public facility improvements. That includes any accessibility requirements for any public buildings. We can do some street improvements specifically targeted to neighborhoods that primarily house low-income people, and also to support social service agencies that provide services to our residents. In the next 5 years, we're projecting that we're going to be conservatively creating up to 10 affordable units. That includes single and multifamily through the housing rehabilitation program, and that will either be through the acquisition of buildings to be reconstructed for affordable housing or the rehabilitation of single and multifamily homes. We're proposing that we are going to complete 4 public facility improvement projects, including street improvements or the removal of barrier for accessibility. And then we're also going to support about 3,000 people through the funding of social service agencies. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development has not released its final plan or final dollar amount for the 2024 program year, which begins in July 1st. For those council members who I have been before in the past, you know that this isn't an unusual thing for us. We're constantly, battling back and forth with Washington on the availability of our funds. So as of right now, and for the purpose of public planning and for the purpose of a citizen participation process, which is required when applying for these funds, we can assume that we are going to receive the same amount of money that we received last year, which is about $377,000. So we did place an ad in the paper, and we conducted a public hearing on January 31st. During that hearing, we made available applications for funding with a deadline submission date of March 1st. As I was going through our current year budget, I'm anticipating that we're going to be receiving about $20,000 in income that was generated. That's the income that I referred to at the beginning of the presentation. And in addition, we have about $350,000 in unobligated CDBG funds. So these are monies that we received in prior years that either projects didn't manifest, they were committed to activities and they didn't manifest, so the money was recaptured, or there were funds that were set aside for specific projects, and those particular projects also didn't manifest, but applications weren't received for it. So as a result of that, the applications that we did receive was the continued support of social services. These are also comments that we received during our public needs meeting. Applications for our social service agencies and the continued support and creation of affordable housing through our housing rehabilitation program. So just to cap, our opening budget for the upcoming program year, which begins on July 1, is about $747,000. Again, these are unobligated funds from the prior year and an anticipated amount that we're going to receive in the upcoming year. The administrative budget is capped at 20% of our annual allocation, so we can never fund more than 20% of what we propose to receive, which in this case would be about $75,960. I'm sorry, 96. In an effort to create more affordable housing and to take into consideration the existing housing stock that we have in Attleboro, I'm allocating the majority of our funds that are available to this initiative. Now, the reason for doing that is I've done a pretty extensive study on the availability of affordable housing here in Attleboro and also the conditions of our existing housing. We have a fast-growing senior population here in Attleboro, and a lot of our seniors actually do reside in mobile homes, and these conditions of these mobile properties are beyond their life expectancy. So I am proposing on putting a new project together over the next 5 years that will allow some sort of lottery system where we would determine the need of the actual property. We would notify the individuals, determine their eligibility, and then add them to a lottery process. And if they win the lottery, for lack of a better term, then they could be eligible to receive a whole new housing unit. We have over 800 mobile units here in Attleboro right now, and I could safely say that probably about 2/3 of them are dilapidated or in the conditions that we're seeing here. We've got floors rotting out, ceilings falling down. I like to refer mobile homes sometimes as building a house out of a deck of cards. If you pull one piece off, the whole thing kind of falls apart. So mobile homes are very similar, especially those built in the mid to late 50s and the early 60s. And we have a lot of those units here in Attleboro. So I think it's really important as our aging population continues to grow, that we put some emphasis on the availability of these decent, affordable units for these individuals. We'll also continue to fund our ongoing housing rehabilitation program for the reconstruction of single-family homes. As part of any housing rehabilitation on multifamily homes, we do require an affordable housing restriction, and we do give the owner the option, the owner-investor the option to enter into an affordable housing restriction. And as a result of that, we secure units for a minimum of 15 years. So this means that these units are now limited on how much they can charge for rent. So just an example here, back to that family of four that we were talking about, based on the calculations that most mortgage companies use and HUD uses in calculating what you're able to afford at $89,000, that family cannot afford more than $2,000 in rent per month. And that's stretching it. That's 35% of their annual income 35% of their gross income prior to any expenses being taken out, any deductions. right now, the fair market rent in Attleboro for a 3-bedroom apartment that would support that family of 4, it's indicated that it's about $1,500 a month. That number is so grossly understated on average based off of what I've been watching in the market, especially within the last 18 months or so. Rents for a 3-bedroom apartment are anywhere from $2,100 to $2,300 a month. So you've got these 4-person household families who can't afford to live here anymore. Not only can they not afford to buy, they also cannot afford to rent. So by really funding these types of activities and putting an emphasis on the use of funds for this, that'll help us generate more affordable units throughout the city and secure those units for a period of time. In addition to funding housing rehabilitation, there was a desire for the continued support of social service agencies. The social service budget is limited on 15% of the proposed annual allocation and 15% of any income that was generated as a result of the program in the prior year. In the current year, we've had a couple of loan payoffs that were pretty substantial. So our income budget was about $71,000 this year, which allowed for us to allocate more money towards social service agencies. We did receive in total 6 applications. We're proposing to fund the 5 projects here. The 1 application that we did receive that we're not proposing to fund was not eligible under the CDBG project guidelines. Okay. As a result of the use of these funds, we anticipate on helping anywhere from 5 to 550 people throughout that program year. Okay. So the city is part of a 14 community consortium. These are home funds. These are funds that are specifically allocated to the creation of affordable housing. As a member of this 14 community consortium, we're able to dip into this available budget, which the proposed budget for the upcoming year is about $840,000. And we're able to address all code-related violations, soup to nut projects, okay? So with CDBG, we have the availability to do emergency assistance. So if somebody's water heater breaks, we have the opportunity to come in and fix it and replace it for them. If there's a big leaky hole in your roof, we have the opportunity to go in and just manage and fix that particular thing. With home funds, it would be everything that was a violation of code, including lead removal and asbestos removal. So as a member of this 14 community consortium, we have the ability to tap into these sources as well. And we expect that we're going to assist anywhere from 2 to 3 families with those particular funds. Okay. So it is mandatory that I open up the availability of the 5-year consolidated plan and the annual action plan for 30 days. Our comment period begins tomorrow, and it will run through May 7th, I think ultimately is how we placed it in the paper. So the action plan is available at the planning department on the city's website. I'll also post the availability of a link on the Community Development Block Grant Facebook page. If you're not a member, I ask that you follow us. Some good information there. And I'm respectfully requesting that the council please provide a vote prior to May 15th so that I can submit this plan on time. Now, with that being said, as of right now, we do not have a final allocation on our funds, so additional language would need to be included in the vote that states that council will allow administration, once the final allocation is relieved, to proportionally increase or decrease each category proposed for the new program year. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Vice President Dole.
Thank you. I have a couple, if that's
Sure.
all right.
Absolutely.
So why is the application deadline so short?
It's about a month. So our public hearing was on January 31st, and then the March submission deadline date was March 5th. And really, it's for planning processes. A lot of, we try to hold off as long as we possibly can to get a final allocation from HUD, but then eventually it comes to a certain point where we need to meet our citizen participation requirements. So we try to give applicants at least a month's period of time to submit their applications and offer any questions. This is a good opportunity if you have a new project or a new proposed activity to reach out to our office and ask what the eligibility of that project is and what additional information could be included in the application to sort of beef up their scoring system. So we do have a process that we go through, which is a scoring system. We primarily look at the agency's ability or the developer's ability or the department's ability to manage that specific project that they're proposing for the use of these funds, whether or not they've had experience with requesting CDBG funds and have successfully managed CDBG funds, and also how that particular project falls in line with our 5-year consolidated plan. So there is a process in place that we would need to go through prior to even presenting to council to open up a 30-day comment period.
Okay, and then as far as, so the funds that you state that things are used for, street improvement, social services, who would submit an application for street improvements for you? To you?
DPW typically. There have been some neighbors who, in neighborhoods with terrible sidewalks, that have contacted our office and asked if there is availability of funds, or they've heard that CDBG funds can be used for the repair of sidewalks. We are somewhat limited on the use. If there's existing sidewalks there with curb cutting, we can't do anything about those sidewalks. That's considered general maintenance under the CDBG guidelines, and it's up to the city to take care of those. But if there are neighborhoods that are primarily low income with no sidewalks, or we have sidewalks with no curb cutting, then those qualify for city use. So primarily DPW would submit applications.
Okay.
In reference to public facility, we've also received applications for the removal of barriers. Recently, we did a project over at Arca Bristol County. We put a new ramp in for them, so if you happen to be driving down Park Street here, the ramp on the exterior, that was funded with CDBG money. The handicapped accessible doors, both front and back in this building, have also been use of CDBG funds.
Okay.
So.
And then I just have one last one, if that's okay. When you talked about, forgive me, the housing improvements. The slide?
Yes.
So when you talk about the aging, the senior population and such, does it concern you, like if that, and so I know that rehabbing and all that's a great thing, does assessed values concern you when it comes to these folks now have to pay, they're gonna reassess their house, which will be.
Yeah, so with mobile homes, they don't pay any property tax at all because it's on leased land.
So you're just referring to mobile homes?
As far as the reconstruction of mobile homes, yes. As far as housing rehabilitation, typically the improvements that are done to these types of housing rehabilitation projects don't add any significant value to the property. It might make it more attractive on the market to sell, in which we've placed restrictions and a actual lien on the person's property restricting on their availability to sell those properties within a certain period of time. But it's no real value. We're talking about replacing a roof, putting in windows, removing lead, updating a panel to support a heating system or an electrical system. It doesn't really add any significant values. We're not adding bathrooms, we're not adding rooms, we're not putting in granite countertops.
Sure.
It doesn't really add significant value to the property. It may make it more attractive to sell, which we've addressed that through placing liens on property with restrictions on the use of those funds.
Great. Can I ask one?
Yeah, of course.
One last one.
Sure, no problem.
Anything as far as emergencies that you talked about, how does one access the funds if it is a true emergency? So hypothetically, a family of 3, their hot water heater goes, or their boiler, or whatever. How do they have to fill out an application? Like, is it a long process for them when it's an emergency situation?
Sometimes it can be, but when we know someone doesn't have any hot water or doesn't have any heat in their property, we execute the process much quickly. In reference to our regular rehabilitation program, we're required to go through a formal process. We have a housing rehab consultant on staff. He goes out, does an inspection of the property, completes a work write-up, does work estimates. We invite contractors to come and bid on that project. That particular project takes a little bit of time, right? Soup to nuts from the start to the time that we actually go to commitment, it can be up to 60 days. When it comes to emergency cases, we're only required to obtain 2 quotes at maximum. If it's determined that the first quote is cost and reasonable, we can move pretty quickly. We've had a number of plumbers and electricians who've worked with the program in the past or have expressed interest in working with the program. So when we have cases like that, we reach out to them. Hey, we've got this family who has no hot water. Can you give us a quote on a 45-gallon efficient tank? You
Right.
know, and they provide those quotes pretty quickly, and they know the urgency of it, and they know that, you know, they're gonna get paid at the end of it. So it can happen pretty quickly in some cases.
All right.
I have a particular example I'd like to offer up. We had a person contact us on Friday, and by the following Thursday, so not the following week, but the week after, they had hot water. So that seems like a long time to go without hot water. But realistically, in the program requirements, they do have to fill out an application. We do have to determine that the hot water tank is non-functioning or it's exceeded its life expectancy. And we do need to get quotes, and we do need to get the contractor to come out.
Right.
Those are things we can avoid doing, but we try to execute the process as quickly as possible. So even 10 days may seem like a long period of time in retrospect to not have any hot water, but for us, it's pretty quick.
Right. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Sawyer, Forward, and then Lavoy.
Hi.
Excuse me. I noticed on one of your slides it said 10 units would be the creation or rehabilitation. Is the 10 units what you think that the amount of money that you have that you'll be able to do, or is there a possibility of doing more?
There's always a possibility of doing more. It really depends on what applications we receive. The Housing Rehabilitation Program is a first come, first served basis. In reference to the reconstruction of a mobile home, I can tell you that new mobile home you see there, a total cost project was $250,000. Just so you know that the family that's benefiting from this pays about $160 a month back to the city. So that's their mortgage with us for that particular new unit. So it's still affordable to them. So that ran us about $250,000. You know, with the cost of construction going up so much, especially since the pandemic, and the availability of contractors to do this type of work, that 10 is a conservative number, but I always like to err on the side of conservativeness, just to be on the safe side and not present an overzealous budget and exceed the expectation as opposed to not meeting them.
Thank you.
Council Forward.
Following up on Councilor Sawyer's question, does 10 mean the total in 5 years, or is it so that's 2 a year?
It would be on average 2 a year, and then an additional 2 to 3 a year with home funds.
And you talk about multifamily units. What's that?
So anything that's more than one unit would be considered a multifamily unit according to HUD guidelines. HUD guidelines technically considers single family 1 to 4 units, but for our sake of purposes here in Attleboro, we have a lot of triple deckers, so we would consider that a multi-unit. In order to be eligible in a triple decker case, 2 out of the 3 units needs to be set aside as affordable. More than 51% of the units would be set aside as affordable. So we had a case probably 2 or 3 years ago that we put $170,000 into rehabilitating a triple decker, and we've secured 2 units for 15 years. So not a bad trade-off ultimately for the amount of investment that we put in the project. Also, with owner investors, we do require that some of their own money be invested to the rehabilitation of the project. And again, we place a lien on the property. If there's any idea that they're going to try to sell it after they've done all this work, there's a penalty to paying those funds back.
Thank you, President.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Lavoy.
She touched on it, so I am all set. Thank you.
Councilor Tavares.
Just real quick, just a clarification. Did you say on a rehabilitation project for a mobile home that it was around 250,000?
It was.
One unit?
One unit. It was. That, yeah, that includes displacement. There's a displacement clause with CDBG funds. If you're displacing a person for a period of time, you need to offer alternative forms of housing to them, and you need to be able to provide funding for that alternative form of housing. So about $10,000 or $14,000 of that funds was covering the cost of the housing. But yeah, demolition, removal, the unit, you know, there was an issue with the septic tank, the replacement of the septic tank. It was a pretty substantial amount of funds.
Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. So that 250,000, was that for a brand new unit?
Brand new.
It was, okay,
Yep,
all right.
yep. So what we determined that the cost to renovate that unit versus the cost of a new unit, it was more cost effective just to tear it down and put a new unit in.
All right, completely
And I'm sure
agree.
the owners agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for asking.
Additional questions or comments? Todd, thank you as always.
No problem.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, folks. Have a great evening.
Todd, do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Do we have anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Do we have anyone to speak neither for nor against? Mr. Kerr, good evening.
Good evening. I just got off the phone with the wonderful trooper at the Foxborough Barracks where I reported the hate crime that just occurred. 10-year prison sentence capable in Massachusetts, so if you guys want to commit another one, that's completely fine with me. I can go at it all day. Once you have recognized me, it's not disorderly. Speech cannot be disorderly. You cannot call a point of order for speech. You need to recognize this. And the state trooper, when they eventually get there, they're going to tell you this. You guys seem to have a massive misunderstanding of the law, our constitutional rights, in your own authority, council members. Last week, the talking points
Mr.
I
Kerr,
was
public
hearing were
hearings are
disgusting and
important
sickening in
opportunities for
nature.
members of the
I have
public
no
to share
idea
their
if you guys
opinions,
paid
thoughts,
attention in school.
concerns.
When your
Please keep
teachers
your
talking
comments
about
particular
Revolutionary
to
War,
this
or if
matter.
you guys just don't even care to use Google or move your thumbs before you speak at these meetings representing the government and acting on behalf of the great people of Attleboro. So tonight we're going back to 1782 and we'll be covering a wide range of state law, federal law, God-given inalienable rights.
Do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, Councilor Cobus, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
I declare this public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, will you please read the notice for the third public hearing?
Certainly. Public hearing. In accordance with Section 13-4 Compensation Plan of the Revised Ordinances of the City of Attleboro, the mayor requests an approval of a 2% increase for exempt employees in the city's comprehension plan for fiscal year '25, effective July 1st, 2024.
I will remind speakers that public hearings are important opportunities for members of the public to share their opinions, thoughts, concerns, and show support or opposition for a particular matter. And as such, we will ask all speakers to keep their comments relative to the matter of each public hearing as is laid out in the council's rules and procedures. Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Do we have anyone to speak against? Do we have anyone to speak neither for nor against? Mr. Kerr.
The council rules cannot supersede the U.S. Constitution, the Massachusetts Constitution, or Massachusetts state law. That's not how the council's rules work and the law works. Federal law reigns supreme, then state law needs to be compliant with federal law, and council ordinances need to be compliant with state law and therefore federal law or constitutional law. These are God-given inalienable rights.
Mr. Kerr, we're going to ask again that you keep your comments close to what the matter at hand is about.
If you want to commit a third hate.
Councilor Angelo, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
No, President Delicio, I do not.
Declare that public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, please go on to the reading of the fourth public hearing.
Certainly. Public hearing regarding the placement of the guest services supervisor at Capron Park to grade 4 and place the zoo education curator to grade 6 as an amendment to the exempt classification plan established in section 13-3.1.
Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Mr.
Let's
Kerr.
go 4 for 4, please. I have a right to be here. You're only discriminating against me because I'm physically disabled. This is retaliatory, and I'm protected under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. You cannot discriminate against me purely because I'm disabled, physically disabled. That's what you're doing. You're trying to silence a civil rights advocate. You're calling attention at the last meeting where you guys spoke about limiting access to the disabled, which would entail
Mr. Kerr,
the
if you
blind.
have comments that relate to this public hearing, we're very happy to hear your comments relating to this public hearing.
Let's go 4 for 4.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Councilor Angelo, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
No, President Delicio, I do
Thank you. I
not.
declare this public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, please go on to the reading of the final public hearing of the evening.
Public hearing regarding the placement of the local inspector to grade 7 and place the plans examiner to grade 8 in the exempt classification plan from the Attleboro Laborers Union and add the title of veterinarian to Article 16, uniform and clothing allowance in the personnel rules and regulations.
Do we have anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak against? Anyone to speak against? Do we have anyone to speak neither for nor against? Mr. Kerr, good evening.
Good evening. Any attorney worth his salt will be glad to take up this case. 5 for 5, hopefully we go. It's 50 years in state prison with you getting your shit pushed in. I'm really excited for it. So please interrupt my speech.
Do you have any, do your comments?
5 hate crimes in one night. Let's do it, Council President Delicio. Interrupt my speech.
Public hearings are important opportunities for the member of the public to share their opinions, thoughts, concerns, show their support or oppositions for a particular matter, and as such, we will ask all speakers to keep their comments relative to the matter of each public hearing. Do we have anyone else to speak neither for nor against? Councilor Angelo, do you see any reason to keep this public hearing open?
No, sir.
I declare that public hearing closed. As we are operating under suspended rules, we will now go into committee reports as Councilor Clovis needs to have a previous engagement.
Names, communication.
Yep, we'll do that after because
Okay.
we're operating under suspended rules.
Thank you. Reporting from Finance Committee. For the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I move to transfer $40,000 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account Assessor Appraiser Services.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
We talked about this in committee. This is for, to bring on a new appraiser service.
Vice President Dolan.
I have 40,250.
Is that not what I said?
You said 40,000.
Sorry, 40,250.
I just wanted to-
Excuse me.
oh.
Yes.
We'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote beginning with Councilor Clovis.
Mr. Cobus?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And from the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I move to approve the vote and authorize the following. 1. Rescind vote number 6 and vote number 7 taken on December 5th, 2023. 2. Accept the $2,387,972.13 balance of the city's Bristol Community ARPA allocation in the form of a grant pursuant to the terms and conditions in the grant agreement for the Bristol Street water main replacement construction between the city and the Bristol County ARPA program. 3. Authorize the reallocation of any unused funds from the wastewater equipment project and the Lindsay Street water main replacement project to be put toward the Bishop Street water main replacement project pursuant to the terms and conditions in the grant application for the Bishop Street water main replacement construction.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
And again, we discussed this pretty extensively last week. This is rescinding the roughly $2.4 million that was going towards the Lindsay Street project, because the bid for that project came in, the construction bid came in under what we had planned. So we had enough money previously allocated for that. So we're rescinding the vote that we took in December for the roughly 2.4 million, and we're taking that money and moving it over and doing the Bishop Street water main project. So it's just moving that. It's all ARPA funds. The Lindsay Street project is still happening. We have funds to do that, and it's because the bid came in under what we had anticipated.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote beginning with Jonathan. Councilor Tavares, rather.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Cobus?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
That concludes the business for the Finance Committee. I call for committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Councilor Foa.
There is no business from my committee this evening. Cancel that committee meeting.
For IT and infrastructure?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Licenses with Councilor Lavoy.
Licensing Committee has no business for this evening, and we will call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Great, thank you. Councilor Reynolds.
Reporting for City Property and Claims Committee from the docket of April 2nd, 2024. I move to accept the generous donation of $500 in Stop and Shop gift cards and $150 in Market Basket gift cards from Rosemary Burrows to the City Veterans Services Office.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Just a very grateful thank you for this donation.
Absolutely. Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, this requires a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I move to approve the generous donation of $100 in Stop and Shop gift cards from Lucille Cargill to the Veterans Services Office.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
Only again, thank you to Lucille for her donation.
Absolutely. Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, this also requires a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. That is all the business City Property and Claims Committee has this evening, but I would like to call a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Vice President Dolan.
Thank you. Reporting for Public Works Committee from the docket of February 20th, 2024. I move to approve the National Grid request to locate poles, wires, and fixtures along and across the following public way. Turner Street, install 2 Joe poles on Turner Street to relocate pole A78 west of pole 177. This is to serve the pump station in the city of Attleboro.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilor Lavoy, motion's in order. Any questions?
No,
Any comments?
oh, sorry. No, we had the public hearing and we discussed in committee.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll have roll call vote beginning with Councilor Foa.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes.
That's all the business for the Public Works Committee, and we'll call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lavoy, do you mind reporting for Public Safety and Emergency Management? I believe
Yes.
there's no business.
Oh, there's no business? Perfect. Public Safety Committee has no business this evening, and we'll call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. Reporting for Personnel, Veterans, Human Service Committee. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I move to approve the appointment of Jerry Lynch, 172 Richardson Ave, to serve as a Veterans Grave Officer for a term of 1 year, term to expire February 2025.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
We're lucky to have Jerry, and we discussed this in committee.
Additional questions, comments, concerns? Councilor Angelo, I agree. Jerry Lynch is a one of a kind, to say the least. This requires a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I move to approve the appointment of Megan Kerr, 47 Green Street, to fill an unexpired term on the Board of Park Commissioners, term to expire February 2025.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. Any comments?
We discussed it in committee.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, this also requires a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That's all for Personnel, Veterans, Human Service Committee. Call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Councilor Sawyer.
There's no business for the zoning and land use tonight, and we'll call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Councilor Waterman.
There's no business for the Transportation and Traffic Committee this evening. We will call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. And Councilor Tavares.
Thank you, President Delicio. Reporting for ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. From the docket of September 19th, 2023, I move to approve the following: amending Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, trade in fur products prohibited. Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro is hereby amended by adding a new section 11-23 as follows.
Second.
Thank you. You may waive the reading as you read it. It's been read into the record. Any comments?
Thank you. Yes. So we discussed in committee last week, but just to summarize, there really aren't any substantive changes, I think, in terms of the practical nature of this amendment. I mean, the proposal bans the sale of fur products. That's something we discussed. And this is also something that I've reviewed with the local Chamber of Commerce, with Jack Link, who's the president. I thought it was important to reach out to the business community and get their feedback and thoughts, and he confirmed a lot of what I suspected, which is that this doesn't affect any current businesses in Attleboro, and I don't think there's the prospect of this affecting any businesses in the near future. Notably, there's currently one bill in the Senate and one in the House that address the ban of the sale of furs. And the language of this proposal here before the council tracks pretty closely with that House bill. So that is something that's happening at the state level. So eventually that might start to cover the landscape as far as the whole Commonwealth at some point potentially. But right now only 6 communities have passed similar ordinances. Again, quite honestly, this ordinance, I don't think will result in any substantive change in Attleboro. So because of that, I'm probably a bit ambivalent, if I'm being honest, towards this, but I don't see a reason not to pass it. So that concludes my comments.
Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delacio. This one's near and dear to my heart, and I want to thank Councilor Tavares for doing a great job in research and putting this together, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you.
Councilor LaVoy.
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments. One, happy to support it from my friend across the little circle here. But I just wanted to clarify one thing, because I had received an email, actually 2 of them, that there was a public hearing in November for this, obviously before my time, but people were concerned that there was no public hearing. Rest assured, the city is doing its job and ensuring that we had a public hearing.
Councilor Dolan.
Just quick too, like I realize it's not gonna affect any businesses in the city, but I think it shows who we are as a community putting this on the books regardless of who it affects. So I still think it's important, even though it's not directly affecting anybody. It's important, and it shows what kind of people we are and what we care about, and so I thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, beginning with Councilor Tavares.
Mr. Tavares?
Yes.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Angelo?
Yes.
Vice President Dolan?
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Lavoy?
Yes.
Ms. Foa?
Yes.
President Delicio?
Yes.
9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, motion passes.
That concludes the business of ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. Call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Mr. Tavares.
And the special committee on, or for tax abatement review has no business for this evening. Call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Councilor Fuller.
The Special Committee on Rules and Procedures has no business this evening. I call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delacio. Special Committee on Classification Compensation has no business this evening, and we call for a meeting at the next appropriate time.
Thank you. We will now go into a reading of the mayor's communication. Thank you. So just for clarification, I know it's a little confusing tonight. Former Vice President Council Kovitz had a previous engagement, so where we're operating under suspended rules, we're able to take the committee reports. We will now go into May's communication, clerk's communication, any old business, and then new business.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your flexibility, too.
April 2nd, 2024. Dear Municipal Councilors, I respectfully submit a communication from Fire Chief Scott T. LaChance regarding the receipt of an Emergency Management Performance Grant, EMPG, from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, in the amount of $20,150. These funds must be utilized for emergency management-related activities and equipment procurement. The funds provided through this grant will be utilized to procure an inflatable rescue boat with outboard motor, personal flotation devices, rope throw bags, ice suits, and other small water rescue items. In accordance with Chapter 1, Section 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body approve expending of such funds in any future grant amendments supporting documents provided.
Public Safety and Emergency Management, please.
I respectfully submit for confirmation by your honorable body the appointment of Ethan Mattos, 45 Linden Street, to fill an expired term on the Council on Human Rights, term to expire February 2027, supporting documents provided.
Personnel, Veterans, Human Services, please.
I respectfully submit for confirmation by your honorable body the appointment of Linda Giamarino of 132 Locust Street to fill an expired term on the Board of Election Commissioners, term to expire February 2028, supporting documents provided.
Personnel, Veterans, Human Services, please.
I respectfully submit communications from Fire Chief Scott LaChance regarding equipment that the fire department would like to surplus. There was no interest in the listed items from any of the departments. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body to declare the following as surplus and available for disposition, supporting documents provided.
City Property and Claims, please.
I respectfully submit for confirmation from Director of Veteran Services Ben Quell regarding the donation of $2,500 in Stop and Shop gift cards from the Attleboro Elks Lodge 1014 in accordance with Section 1-12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro. I hereby request your honorable body accept these generous donations to the City of Attleboro, supporting documents provided.
Thank you to the Attleboro Elks Lodge, number 1014. That'll go to City Property and Claims, please.
Thank you. I respectfully submit a communication from Human Resource Director Lynn Davin requesting a change to the exempt classification plan by adding a licensed social worker to the exempt classification plan. As you know, the Commonwealth has stipulated that opioid abatement funds be used to supplement and strengthen resources available to communities and families for substance use disorder prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. In accord with the state's mandate, the city's opioid settlement funds plan calls for the hiring of a licensed social worker to assist the city in serving and supporting residents and family members struggling with the impacts of opioid use disorder. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body place the licensed social worker to a grade 8 in the exempt classification plan. Additionally, in that this request involves an amendment to the classification plan established in section 13-3.1, a public hearing is required. I hereby request your honorable body call for a public hearing supporting documents provided.
That'll go to Personnel, Veterans, Human Services, and Councilor Angelo, would you like to call for a public hearing on May 7th?
Yes, yes, President Delicio.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Attleboro has been fortunate to have been served for many years by effective and qualified persons in the roles of city treasurer and city collector. But in an increasingly complex and risk-intensive financial environment, the time has come to stop relying on luck and having qualified candidates running for and winning these offices. Along with other members of the city's finance team, the treasurer and the collector play key roles in the city's credit rating, establishing financial policies, debt management, financial planning, and ensuring the city's fiscal integrity to residents, businesses, and other entities. In a May 18, 2023 article in City and Town, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services reported that between 2014 and 2023, the number of communities that provide for the appointment of the treasurer and collector increased from 248 to 308. According to the article, this is largely due to the growing complexities of municipal government and finances, along with community demand for accountability, professionalism, make it progressively more important for cities and towns to reflect on ways to improve their operations and efficiencies. In particular, treasurers and collectors must have extensive knowledge and are essential members of the community's financial management team. Moreover, as municipal positions grow in responsibility and require skill set, communities are turning to appointed positions to attract a wider pool of candidates with strong credentials and relevant professional experience. Perhaps most importantly, changing these roles to appointed positions allows the opportunity to define by ordinance the eligibility criteria, specific job requirements, duties, and performance expectations for each position. Please know that I have spoken with the city's finance team members, all of whom support the change of city treasurer and city collector from elected to appointed positions. Additionally, a letter of support from the Division of Local Service is also included for your consideration. Amending the city charter to change the positions of treasurer and collector from elected to appointed can be accomplished in a couple of ways, because the reasons for making this change are clear, convincing, and in the long-term best interest of the city. I am proposing this particular change be made by special act to the state legislature so that it may become effective before the 2025 municipal election. Please know, too, that if your honorable body and the legislature approve this charter change, certain amendments to relevant provisions of Section 5-3 and 5-4 of the revised ordinances will be necessitated. Accordingly, for all the reasons above, I respectfully request the municipal council approve the attached resolution to amend the city charter to provide for the appointment of the positions of city treasurer and city collector, and to petition the Massachusetts legislature to enact the same. Although not required in this circumstance, I humbly suggest the municipal council call for a public hearing to afford residents the opportunity to comment on this matter.
Ordinances, elections, and legislative matters, and Councilor Angelo, would you like to call for, Councilor Tavares, would you like to call for a public hearing on May 21st?
Yes. All right, excuse me.
Second.
Thank you, motion is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I respectfully submit a communication from Fire Chief Scott T. LaChance regarding the need for overtime funds to fill dispatcher vacancies for the remainder of fiscal year '24. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $45,000 from account 1124100-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 1220100-513021 via dispatch overtime, supporting documents provided.
Public Safety and Emergency Management, please.
I have received a communication from Budget Administrative Director Mason Lord concerning the statutorial imposed time constraints for the submission and adoption of the annual budget. In order to comply with those time constraints, I respectfully request your honorable body call for a special meeting on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, for the presentation of the fiscal year 25 proposed general funds budget and the fiscal year 25 proposed budget for the Water and Wastewater Enterprise Fund, supporting documents provided.
Finance Committee, and I will ask that we post that special meeting for April 23rd.
I have received a communication from Building Inspector Bill McDonough requesting funds to purchase a 150-watt diesel generator for the City Hall complex to better ensure consistent services to residents during storm-related power outages and avoid having to close City Hall during normal work hours. I believe it is in the best interest of the city and our residents to invest in a backup power source. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $182,892 from account 1124100-578380 Citywide Reserve Fund for Capital to account 1124100-599300 Citywide Transfer to Capital Fund, and to further transfer $182,892 to Fund 3518-499600 City Hall Facility Complex Transfer from General Fund. This request includes a 15% contingency.
Public Works, please.
For your information, I regret to inform your honorable body we have received the resignation of Mike Murphy from the Board of Election Commissioners. Please join me in thanking Mr. Murphy for his service to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
I have received a communication from Budget and Administration Director Mason Lord concerning a request to authorize the use of $1.2 million opera funds, $1.2 million in opera funds previously designated for Pawtucket Water Interconnect project, plus an additional $25,000 in uncommitted opera funds to fund various water and wastewater capital projects and vehicle purchases. This request is consistent with my commitment to maximizing the use of opera funds and to utilizing alternative funding sources to minimize the impact on the water and wastewater rates, supporting documents provided. Accordingly,
Finance Committee, please.
all right, I respectfully submit a communication from Superintendent of Park and Forestry, Derek Corsi, regarding the need for funds to make repairs to the Newell Shelter. As you know, in the Newell Shelter's 113-year history, it has been a community gathering, place for music, parties, entertainment, and fun. It has also been a popular place to rent for weddings and graduation parties. Adjacent to the popular Capron Park playground and close to the entrance of Capron Park Zoo, the shelter is a highly visible landmark in the city. The repairs are to include sandblasting and removing paint, repaint steel beams, and stain the wood paneling on the ceiling of the Newell Shelter in Capron Park. To ease the impact of the project on city funds, $30,000 of park trust funds will be used. A 10% contingency has been added to this request. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $85,280 from account 1124100-578380 Citywide Reserve Fund for Capital to account 1650100-5 84029 Park Outdoor Facility Improvements, supporting documents provided.
Public Works, please.
Sincerely, Kathleen DeSimone, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now go on to a reading of the clerk's communication.
Clerk's communication, April 2, 2024. We have received an automatic amusement device renewal application from Spooky Games, 9 North Main Street, for 1 video game.
License Committee, please.
We have received the certificate of vote from the Planning Board meeting held on March 19, 2024. The Planning Board voted unanimously in the affirmative to recommend to the Municipal Council that the loan order in the amount of $35,181,000 for the construction administration costs associated with a permanent PFAS treatment facility at the Wading River Treatment Plant is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan.
Hold on. Public Works, please.
We have received a new Class 2 license application from Route 1 Automotive, Inc., 883 Washington Street, with 10 customer parking spaces and 55 display spaces.
License Committee, please.
We have received an...
One moment. Councilor Lloyd, would you like to call for a public hearing on May 7th?
Yes, I would.
Is there a second? Thank you. Motion is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
We have received an application to waive Section 1-15.1 to serve alcoholic beverages or wine on city property, and a license application, Section 9-20, to keeping a stand in a public place from Lawrence Inc., 16 South Main Street.
License Committee, please. And Councilor Lloyd, would you like to call for a public hearing on May 7th?
Yes, I would.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes the clerk's communication.
Thank you. There is no old business. There is one piece of new business for which I will recognize Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, President Delicio. To be referred for study and recommendation to suspend the committee of the whole portion of council meetings pending the conclusion of the council's review of potential revisions to relevant provisions of its rules of procedure.
Second.
Thank you. We will, motions in order. Any comments?
No, sir.
We will refer that to Special Committee on Rules and Procedures. And that is all we have, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned at 9:07.